Well, hello. I didn't see you there. Welcome to a sexy review of Dracula. I always dress for the occasion. Well, hello, viewers. This is my review of Dracula. This is my review of the Dracula production, written and produced and made by Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss. I have a ton of notes. Shall we begin? Episode 1. Episode 1 was called The Rules of the Beast, and we start in Hungary in 1897. I adore the typography they used. And then at the fly, there's the big fly, and it came right up to the television screen and it buzzed like it was right inside your TV, and I thought that was really cool. So they have twisted a lot of stuff around from the original book, which I made sure to read at Christmas time so I'd be prepped and ready. So we start with Mr. Jonathan Harker in the asylum with the nuns looking after him, with Sister Agatha, and she's interviewing him about what happened in Dracula's castle. And there's also a nun with her who's observing. So she's got this manuscript in front of it with what Harker has supposedly written about his experience in the castle with Dracula. So he's discussing about what Dracula is sort of scared of, and the nun wants to know everything and why he hasn't told Mina everything about what happened. And I've written, and then we see a fly go into his eyeball, and it crawls on his eye and it goes behind his eyeball. And Sister Agatha has she's a nun, but she's sort of lost her faith in God a bit. So she wants to know everything about Dracula to see what he's afraid of. So the nun, she intimates that she wants to know if Jonathan Harker, if he thinks Dracula shagged him. And then we get the titles, and they're awesome titles. I love the opening titles, they're brilliant. So we then see the journey to the castle and Harker getting out of the carriage and being warned by the villagers and given cross, and then a wolf is howling. And then we see Mina Murray, she's typing a letter, we see the typing of it, and she says she's enjoying being with the men at home, and she mentions all these nice young men. And then she says, oh, and also the barmaid, which I thought was, is a bit typical of Stephen Moffat. He's always got to put titillation into it. So at first I was annoyed by that a little bit, but so then the driver collects Harker, and then Harker's at Castle Dracula, and he bangs on the door, and there's loads of bats, and then the flies and everything. And then we see the castle fireplace sitting area, and in episode 1 there's loads of jump scares. The first jump scare, well, for me, with having sensitive hearing, there's loads of jump scares. The first jump scare was Jonathan Harker lifting the dinner plate, and it clanged a bit. Then Dracula appears I've looked up how to pronounce his name, but I'm still not entirely sure. But I'm going to call it Claes Bang. I am in love. He's hot. Anyway, we see Dracula up on the balcony, and he's got white long hair, and sort of a haggardy face. And as for a couple of seconds, I was a bit disappointed because I'd seen the trailer with him looking hot. I was like, oh, and eventually he gets hot. And then they have the discussion around the dinner table about the purchase of Carfax Abbey and the house, Carfax House. And then we see Dracula insisting Harker stays for the month. And Dracula said, shall absorb you. And Sister Agatha's doing, is that the word? I can't do her accent. Is that the word he used? Absorb? And it seems like she's already enraptured by Dracula and has this obsession that. So then the castle is all dark and swirly, and Dracula's got a really cool candle holder. It looks awesome, and the edges I thought noted look a bit like I know what the word is for it, but around the turrets of the castle. So there are portraits of the person who built the castle and his wife, and Dracula says, where there is flesh there are flies. Second jump scare is Dracula knocking the mirror off the table, so Harker can't see that Dracula doesn't have a reflection. Third jump scare, these jump scares come quite close together as Dracula's teeth get and he's flashing his teeth at Harker's blood. And it's quite a comfy show with quite Dracula as he's got some good one-liners. And then Harker mentions that Dracula said blood is lives, and Sister Agatha picks up on that Dracula said blood is lives, not life. And Dracula could smell Jonathan Harker's story and who Jonathan Harker knows through his blood. So we're in Harker's room and he hears a scraping and he looks out the window and he sees another creature just peeping out the other window, and then that creature goes back inside. So there is a lot more of the Jonathan Harker being in the asylum than there is in the book. We don't really see any of the asylum bit in the book. So I thought it was quite liked it. And there is a switcheroo between the book and the series where we see in the book it's Mina Murray who we see deteriorate, but in the Moffat and Gatiss version it's Jonathan Harker who we see him deteriorate and how he's all haggard and starting to look undead. So that was different. And then Agatha asks Harker if he had a wet dream of being shagged by Drac. And then she talks about that she can't talk about the dream she has about the other nun. So a little bit more Moffat-y titillation kind of thing. Then Harker finds that Helpers has been written upside down on the glass in his window. And because he's English, he doesn't click onto the fact that it's unusually written in English. So he's looking for the other room we saw, and he gets lost in all the corridors. The corridors in the castle they chose, it just all looks amazing. And then we see that Dracula is starting to look younger and younger. So, and then there's another jump scare, and Harker's splashing his face. and then he sees a woman, and then there's a he goes chasing after her, and then there's a portrait, and it's got spying eyes because Dracula's spying. And then we see Dracula looking even younger, albeit he's got a bit of a Phil Collins-ish hairstyle, which doesn't really suit. And then Harker's figured out that there's no staff, and he asks Dracula if anyone else lives there. So we see Jonathan Harker's aging as Drax getting younger, and there's a scar on Harker's neck. Then cut back to the nuns, and Agatha thinks Harker is brave. Then there's labyrinthine corridors, and Harker finds the room with the wooden boxes and finds photos inside and lots of flies and rats. And then this big undead zombie starts climbing out, and then this other body grabs him from behind and he runs away. Jump scare 5. Ah, it's a bat. And then he's found Dracula's tomb with Dracula inside it. And Dracula starts climbing out, and he's caught between these undead zombies and Dracula. And then we get a shot of Dracula, and it's very reminiscent of a Christopher Lee shot. Then Agatha talks about the undead and saying that they must have a plan. And Agatha says the nuns and Harker that they've got to formulate a plan to deal with Dracula. Then we go back to the castle, and Harker awakens, and Dracula's even younger, drinking wine, and he sounds more British because he's picked up Harker's accent through his blood. And then there's a baby, the baby in the sack moment where Harker, there's a sack and baby cries come from it, and Harker knows that he's got a baby in there because it's like food for the zombie, but I think it was. Anyway, Harker's starting to forget Mina, and then that's when Dracula makes him write the 3 letters, and we got a classic line, "You do look rather drained." Oh, Dracula's so sexy. And then Harker's just in total despair, thinking this baby's gonna get fed to somebody, and Harker reveals his plan to kill Dracula. And then he realizes that Dracula revealed that he knew more than he intended to reveal, that he revealed. And then he figured out that the architect's wife's portrait contains the map of the castle. So he gets the map out, and then he goes back to the room with the boxes. And then another jump scare, and there's a woman undead creature in the box, and she meets Harker, and she's a vampire, but she's still young and stuff. This woman, she learnt languages from the victim's blood, and because she's speaking English, and the woman vampire, she drained the baby, and she's not repelled by a cross. Then there's a cool vampire teeth transition shot, and then we see this baby vampire zombie, and Dracula's like, "Oh, I've got a vampire, I'll keep him on." This baby vampire zombie is really daft looking, and that we only see it for like 2 seconds, and then the woman vampire is staked. So Drac has vampire brides so he can reproduce, and then we see the first cape swish. And then Dracula explains that he gets these he gets the languages and education and the lives of the people he eats, and he says, "You are what you eat." I thought I loved that line. And then Dracula's lying next to Harker, and he tells him that he ate Mozart, and that so they're outside, and Dracula's put his cape down, and they're lying on the turret, and he wants Harker to tell him what the sunrise or the sun, it's either sunrise or sunset, what it looks like, what the sun looks like when it's rising and setting. And then we hear bells outside the asylum, and then we discover that the manuscript that Harker thinks he's wrote a whole diary about what happened, and all he's done is wrote notes, repetitive notes that just praise Dracula that he wrote when he arrived at the asylum. So then back at the castle, flashback to the castle, and Harker's saying he's trying to destroy Dracula. Dracula makes him give his word that he won't try and stop him. And then Harker says he'll do everything in his power to stop Dracula, and Dracula snaps his neck. And Harker is undead, but he's not yet full scary vampire. And then Harker is awakening as an undead, and Dracula says, "You could be my finest bride." Dracula sees the sun then screaming because Harker was standing on top of the turret walls, and he doesn't know why Dracula was screaming, but they work it out that it's because he was wearing a crucifix, and the reflection of the sun fell on Dracula's face, and the sunlight made a reflection off the cross, which was a cross shadow that fell on Dracula's face. So then Sister Agatha feels that she's found her belief in God again, and she thinks that she's saved Harker. Then, big reveal, the observing nun is Mina. And then Sister Agatha, we get a nod to Sherlock, Victorian era Sherlock, and Sister Agatha says, "I have a detective acquaintance in London." I love that. That was fun. And then I wrote how they switched the vampire attack from Mina in the book to Jonathan Harker. And then, there's loads of bats arrived, and Dracula's coming to the asylum / nunnery, and then Jonathan Harker's vampirism comes out because Mina gets she gets a cut and some blood starts coming out, and he's like and then the convent is under attack from the forces of darkness, and Agatha says perhaps they're sensitive to criticism. Then so Mina still believes that Jonathan is good, but then he takes some of her blood and starts sucking on his fingers with her blood. And Dracula's in wolf form, and he turns up at the asylum gates and he basically climbs out of the skin of a wolf. And then we see a shot of Jonathan's fangs, and they're oozing like snake venom, and he's begging for Mina's blood, but he wants to stake himself because he wants to save himself. Then Dracula is naked, which is a nice view, and he's taunting the nuns, and then all the sisters are in formation with their stakes. And then there's a joke about how they won't look at him, but they won't look at his cock because he's naughty. Then Agatha says that Dracula's not invited in, but she does unlock the gates, and she's asking him about all the vampire legends, about why they exist, and she asks him why he needs an invitation, and Dracula's all posturing, and saying he only needs one nun to invite him in, and he's trying to find the weakest nun that can invite him in. And then Agatha spills her blood, and she's shown that Dracula's the weakest because he needs the blood, and Agatha wants to learn about him. And Dracula asks who she is, and then we find out it's Agatha Van Helsing, an educated woman in a crucifix. Agatha's talked to Mina about how Dracula has lasted so long, and that it's up to Agatha and Mina to stop Count Dracula. Then Dracula climbs into the building and sees Jonathan Harker, who's tried to stake himself, but that doesn't work, so he invites him in. And then we see in the chapel there's the Mother Superior's giving a lecture about courage. And then Dracula is there, and we look up, and he's cut off Mother Superior's head, and the nuns are all screaming, and then he acts like a bride, chucking the Mother Superior's head over his shoulder, and the head lands on a nun. Then Agatha's getting out the sacramental bread to try to stop him, and Dracula's controlling the wolves. So the wolves attack the nuns. Then Agatha is going through and testing the facts of the Dracula legend. Then Agatha and Mina are in the room with the sacramental bread, and Jonathan Harker walks in. And because she thinks it's Jonathan Harker, Mina invites him in because she still believes he's good. And then she realises Jonathan Harker's eyes, they're not blue, they're black. When it's actually Dracula, and he's wearing Harker's face, and he starts peeling his face off. And that was the end of episode 1. Really enjoyed it. Very gory, but I was intriguing. And then Dracula episode 2. It's called Blood Vessel, and it's all about the travelling on the Demeter ship over to Whitby. So, but we start with Dracula is in his castle, and he's playing chess with Sister Agatha. So at first it's like, what's going on? There's something I agree with Dracula, is he can't bear a bad book. He's got to enjoy it straight away, and that's me too. I can't bear a bad book either. Then so Sister Agatha is in the castle and they're playing chess, which is weird. Then they're chatting about the Demeter trip, and then we see a ship in a bottle, and he says, and Dracula's like, okay, I'll tell you the story, but don't get too attached to any of the characters. So that was a bit meta. Then we see the titles, then we see the boat, and there's a hand, there's a hand like in Adam's Family, or is it the Munsters? But and he's crawling along, and this undead zombie guy says, have you seen my hand? But turns out that it was the captain dreaming this. Then we see Dr. Sharma, and he's investigating the wooden box, and it's got scratches on the inside. Then Peter, fake Peter, his brother was called Peter, and his brother was bitten and killed was bitten by Dracula. So a priest and his mother are staking him so he can't become a vampire. So they're loading the ship, and Peter's brother, who's really called Marius, he takes his place. And then we have this Lord and Lady Ruthven boarding the ship. There's then some flies about. And then Peter, he's drinking to work, and he's a bit nervous and frightened. The deckhand agrees that it's a bit scary, and then a woman does a sign of the cross over a crate. And they find boxes of mould, and it turns out Dracula's just walking around openly among the passengers. So I thought, I like that we got more about the trip on the Demeter and we see Dracula. In the book, they sort of hint that he's about, but we aren't with him. So in room 9, there's a sick passenger. Then Drac catches one of the deckhands listening at the door, and another one-liner makes one ravenous, and there's loads of flies. And then Peter, the deckhand, is having a chat with the other deckhand about where they're from, and he has a joke, needs more paprika, and I thought I was cute. And Dracula's doing, I'm the king of the world, on the prow of the boat, and then he blows out the clouds of mist that obscure where the boat's sailing to. Then then we see the posh passengers, and Adisa, who is Lord Ruthven's man in more ways than one. He's angry, and then Dr. Sharma is using sign language for his daughter so she can understand what's being said. Then Dracula's in the dining room and he sees the Grand Duchess, and she's got a huge red gemstone which is gorgeous, and she was invited to England by a Mr. Balawi, and he wants to write her story. Then Dracula's on deck with the steering, with the guy steering the ship's wheel, and he sucks his blood, and now he can speak German. Then he goes back to see the Grand Duchess speaking fluent German, and then talking about the Grand Duchess's 18th birthday present, and that her present was a pineapple, and then she recognises that he's the guy she danced with on her 18th birthday. And then the captain awakens and he starts to get to the ship's wheel, and the Dracula sucks Valeria, the Grand Duchess's blood, and they keep avoiding cabin 9, and the deckhands like looking for these missing people, and Dracula's like, he starts quoting song lyrics, to be honest. He says, always take the weather with you, and he's got these cool sunglasses with 2 lenses on the front and 2 lenses on the side. They're awesome, they're cool, very cool sunglasses. I love those. And then talks about the story of Nelson and the barrel of rum, how they brought Nelson back to England in a barrel of rum, but they didn't actually tell the deckhands or the sailors, so little by little they drank this rum, and then it was just Nelson in there with no rum to preserve him. So Dracula goes checks the barrel for corpses, and is like, oh no, and he's joshing about like old Dracula. Then the passengers discussing the missing people. Dorabella Ruthven is in her cabin. Peter has some more paprika banter with Victor, and Victor's the deckhand with the prosthetic, which is a hook. Victor's constantly going on about how he hates Romanians. And then we find out 7 passengers on the Demeter, 6 now, and we find out that Dracula treasures youth. Lady Ruthven's awake. Then Dr. Sharma awakens. His face is scratched. 3 jump scares, zombie vamp. And then there's they got another deckhand steering the ship. Lady Ruthven's on deck, and Dracula saunters up and starts chatting her up. And Dracula says that children sounds like a miracle to him, and he's totally flirting. And then he just comes right out and says he's a vampire. And then he makes the water in the barrel create a portrait of the Ruthvens and the possibility of them having a family. So it's like a family portrait that he makes appear. And then we're in Dr. Sharma's cabin, and his daughter's lying on the bed, and blood starts dripping on her face from the ceiling, and it's from the deck, and Dracula's eating Dora Bally, and Dr. Sharma's daughter actually sees him eating Dora Bally. And then there's Dracula talks here that Dracula only eats the best kind of people, and he's like a pig with truffles. And then there's a pun about a skeleton crew. Then everyone gathers together, and Dracula starts being all cocky, saying he's being sort of bit Poirot, like deducing everything, and he's just examining cabin 9. The captain examines it, but then we don't go in with the captain, so we don't actually see what he sees. And then they start investigating the boxes. Dracula, number one liner, Dracula says, "I have an appetite for science." He says, "I have an appetite for it." Abramoff falls to deck of a deckhand from the lookout thing. And then there's blood, and Dracula's like, "I have to hide, there's blood." So he has to hide, and then they splint this deckhand's leg, and Dracula's all like, "Who wants? He's hungry, he's thirsty," but he has to disguise it in front of the passengers. Then Olga and the deckhand serving the passengers, and Drac's like mega hungry because he's looking at all the pulses of the other passengers. We see close-ups of them beating, and then these other passengers, they figure out that who got them on the ship was the same person as a Mr. Balawe, and it's actually an alias for Dracula. So he's on this Demeter boat, and he's teaching himself to dine with restraint, so he only absorbs the best people. And then Valentine is on deck looking at lifeboats, and then Dracula's attacking another deckhand, and Peter bursts in. Most of the crew have escaped in lifeboats. Then the captain says, "Time to investigate cabin 9." And then we're back to Dracula's castle, and Agatha, she realizes that, hang on, I'm now losing at this chess game, or what's happening. And then she can't remember how she's in the castle, and then she starts to remember that Dracula let Mina Murray go, and he's slowly feasting on Agatha, and it's Agatha who's in cabin 9 on the ship. And then Dracula invites everyone into cabin 9, and there's the belongings of the victims in there as trophies. And then you find Agatha, and he says to put it that she's the vampire and she's murdered the passengers, but the captain and Dr. Sharma are really doubtful, but some of the crewmen, they want to hang her for being a vampire. And Agatha says she is a vampire, so they don't hang her because it wouldn't make any difference. They couldn't hang a vampire. Then blood drips onto Dracula, and he starts growling, and she's like, "He is the vampire." And then Dr. Sharma and his child, and they all start making the sign of the cross with their hands. And Dracula's like, "Make a good detective." And then he kicks a barrel, and then but the crew catch it and save her, and it's time for Agatha to take charge. And then Agatha's fingernail comes off, she peels it off. Then there's 50 boxes of soil, and Dr. Sharma has researched vampires and has a last resort in a bottle to stop any of his basically stop his loved ones being turned into a vampire. Agfis just only having one box on board the ship, so he has to go to that box to sleep, and then they can get him there. But Dr. Sharma's daughter doesn't trust Ruthven, who's come in to talk to Dr. Sharma. And it turns out Dracula's offered Ruthven a partnership. Well, that's what he said. And Sharma raises the cross symbol, but Ruthven has a gun and threatens Sharma's daughter. His daughter's called Yamini, but she drinks from the bottle and she's poisoned, so she can't be made into a vampire. And then Dr. Sharma is shot by Ruthven, and then Dracula, it's all a big trap so Dracula can eat and suck on Ruthven and inherit all the things from Ruthven. Then Peter bursts in, and then cut to deck, and we see Agatha making a circle of Bible pages stapled round the ship's wheel, or nailed round the ship's wheel. And Peter's crying, but we don't know if he's been turned. So, and if they sit inside the circle, then Dracula can't get to them. So Ruthven's man, or Ruthven's lover, is crying, and Captain Sokoloff is asking about Agatha, and they're asking Peter why Dracula let Peter go, and then they start suspicion, and so they're testing if Peter can go out of the circle, and then it's just as he steps one foot out the circle, Dracula's there, and they grab him back and put him back in the circle. All through this whole story is like, why aren't they just staking him? Why aren't they just staking Dracula? Like, they've had all through this whole series, they have plenty of opportunities to just stake him, but nobody ever does, which is kind of similar to the book. And then Dracula is intrigued by Odessa, and he's tempting him that because the humans, they're full of racism and homophobia, that Odessa could get his revenge. But Odessa tries shooting Dracula, and it does absolutely nothing, and then Dracula pounces on him and sucks his blood and fights the men, and they pin down Dracula, and then they set fire to him using some of the alcohol in the barrels. Then Dracula jumps overboard, and then it's daytime. Olgren's cooking. Captain tells Peter to steer, and Peter sees a headless white bird. Agatha keeps checking the box to see if Dracula's there. Agatha says the ship must not reach England. Then she pulls another fingernail off, and revealing she has the vampire's curse, and they wants them to destroy her with the ship. And then there's a creepy doll with a fly on it, and Peter's reluctant, and Olgren is just ready to leave. He just wants to get out of there. And Agatha's praying, and the ship's creaking, and then there's footsteps. The lifeboat is sailing away, and it turns out the captain stayed on the boat, go down with the ship and all that. So he's come to drink with Agatha, and then Agatha realises a bit of his own earth. Dracula brought a bit of his own earth, and then Sokoloff is going to blow up the ship, and he wants Agatha to keep Dracula talking, so Dracula doesn't notice that's his plan. And it turns out Dracula came back on board the ship, because when they tucked him over the side, he swam under the boat and just got back on again. And then Sutcliffe's crawling to set the explosion, and Dracula's talking about how he loves science, and then this why is he scared of the cross? And Dracula talks about all the people who believed in who feared the cross. He absorbed it from them when he ate them. And Agatha says Dracula's lying to himself. Then the boat explodes. Then Van Helsing believes she is won and she drowns. Peter and Algren see from the lifeboat the boat exploding. Then Peter confesses he's actually Marius. But then we see that Dracula's still alive underwater and he's surfacing onto Whitby Beach. And then there's a helicopter. It's like, what the fuck? It's like, what the fuck? And I wrote, what the fuck? We've gone modern? Why, Moffat? But then I kind of liked the twist that took us into for episode 3, The Dark Compass. Agatha offered herself to die to save Mina. So Mina ran away and Dracula wanted to make it last, make Agatha last, so he could drink her slowly. And then it's 123 years later. There's a smashed shop window in the house in sort of the woods. This woman's fella, he's been out drinking, and he's actually been out drinking with Dracula. And Dracula's actually folded Bob up and put him in a fridge. And then I kind of loved how they did Dracula seeing all this modern stuff. And then they had Dracula watching the sunrise set on telly. I thought that was beautiful. And I kind of felt happy for Dracula that you got to see the sunrise and sunset finally on the telly. I thought I love that. Then Zombie Bob starting to get out of the fridge. And then we see that Dracula's got Agatha's ID badge, but it's not Agatha, it's her descendant. And then we get back to him on the beach and arriving in the modern day. And Agatha's descendant she's just been calm and almost friendly. And then Dracula grabs the video camera and starts filming them. I thought I like that bit. And then he tries to get the security guard to smile. And then there's a small smirk, and then he shoots her. And this woman who looks like Agatha Agatha was her great aunt, and she's called Zoe Van Helsing. Then there's lots of bats. I love that bit where he's back in this woman's house. This woman's called Kathleen, and he's doing the light switch, and I love that he's just clicking the light switch and he likes the sound. I thought that was good. So Dracula's acquired Bob's memories, and then there's the oral joke. He's cried orally, so I thought, typical Moffat. And then Dracula is like, Bob's crawling out the fridge again because he's scary, and Dracula stabs the fridge. Then he finds out the woman's called Kathleen, and because Kathleen has lots of food and TV and all this stuff, and it's basic house. It's quite a scruffy house to modern human eyes. It's quite a scruffy house, but the Dracula says it's luxury and that it's a chamber of marvels because the future brings wonders and makes them ordinary. So I love that the future brings wonders and makes them ordinary. I thought, yeah, because in the 1980s, it's like 1980s, writing letters, writing to pen pals and stuff, and then grow up and there's all this new technology, and then I love that line. And then Dracula's taking questions, and Kathleen's asking about the vampire legends and mirrors because she's seen it in films. And then Dracula, he doesn't see his reflection, but he sees the past and what could be in mirrors. And so then there's loads of classical music, typical like Dracula film classical music, which I thought was funny. But it's just Kathleen's phone. Is her phone tone? Oh, that was funny. And then Dracula hears that someone else is at home, and there's creaking from upstairs, and then he finds a treasure chest, and there's a phone inside. And Van Helsing's arrived, and she tells him, get in the box, because the house is being demolished. She warns him that the house is being demolished, get in the box. So, and then we see this other person with her, and it's actually the same actress who played Lucy in Being Human, and in Being Human, she was also a vampire hunter then. So what? She loves her vampires. And then the fridge door opens and Bob's inside as a zombie. And then there's sort of a fantasy sequence where Dracula is all bitey, and there's a big blood lake, and there's a Van Helsing zombie, and then Drax in the box. And then he's in the box, and as they're going past, he sees a portrait of Jonathan Harker, and then it's like in this chamber, and then we see modern day Dr. Seward, who's called Jack, and there's in this foundation is the Jonathan Harker Foundation, and they're calling him. And then there's also a call from Lucy. Then we see this Lucy, and she's taking selfies for likes. And then I thought it was good because lots of hearts floated from the screen, and it was like a comment about Instagram vampires. These pretty people, they use Instagram to suck likes, and they create visages that are lies, like Dracula lies, and Dracula creates an illusion to suck love and likes. So I thought that was interesting how they sort of said that Instagram modern vampirism is the consuming of adoration and likes from strangers over the internet, which is, and the most vampirish are the people who create a fake life to suck people's belief. So I thought that was an interesting comment on it. Then it's in a club, and we see a modern day Quincy Morris, and so it's Lucy, a modern day Lucy Westenra and Quincy Morris, and they're in the club, and then Quincy meets Jack Seward, and then Lucy's chatting to her gay friend, and then she says, oh, I'm not getting married, and I thought that was, and she's young, and thought that was interesting, possibly a comment on the marriages in the original book that all the women are interested in the original book is just getting married. And then there's screaming and confetti, and Jack gets in a car and thinks about Lucy, and he's going to Whitby and gets to the Abbey, which is awesome, and it's the Jonathan Harker Foundation, which is where Dracula is being kept, and they have the sunrise and sunset times monitored, which we find out is so they can go in and talk to Dracula in this contained space without him jumping out at them. So they put some sunlight in the centre so he can't get to them. And then Jack's put in Scrubs and Zoe Van Helsing. They wanted Dracula for science. And then we see the sort of volunteers that are in the screening room and they're watching about how the ship Demeter was discovered and explored, and that and all these people who have volunteered, they've all got different blood types. So the film shows that they opened the box and they found Dracula, but the diver who has blocks him, she got bit. Her hand was near his face and her finger got bitten, and that woke him up. So she actually woke him up. And then these volunteers are test subjects, and they have controlled exposures to Dracula in a containment area. And then we see the containment area, and Dracula's complaining about, why have you given me a toilet? I don't go to the toilet, I'm a vampire. And they've also given him a Kindle, and I think it's a laptop. It's got loads of books on it. And then the ceiling opens for controlled sunlight, and Dracula's asking, he wants to know what's going on, and so Van Helsing says something about people having rights, and Dracula says no one has rights. And then Dracula's so he wants to hit a vial of his blood, but she can't get the needle through his skin, so he uses his own fingernail to slash his wrist to give some blood. And it turns out the foundation was set up by Mina Murray with Agatha's extended family. Then Dracula twists his skin back together. I thought that looked cool. And Dracula's sort of being treated as a specimen. And then he discovers that Zoe Van Helsing has cancer, and that's why she is doing this science. I didn't really understand. There could have been more explanation about what the foundation actually is doing and how it would work. That would have been good. Then what Gatiss is in it? He's actually in his own show. What a surprise. And then he's Frank Renfield, and I thought he played him really well. And Dracula's been Skyping with Frank because somebody gave him the Wi-Fi password, and the Wi-Fi password was Dracula. Can't get the staff, can you? And then Renfield is his lawyer since 1896. Well, his law firm has helped Dracula since 1896, and Renfield is his current lawyer. So, and then Renfield points out that being old isn't against the law and Dracula has rights. And there's a question about, why does the Foundation have mercenaries? Who's it funded by? And then 8:11 p.m. is sunset, which is when Dracula's legal release form arrived. Then Dracula's emailing Zoe. Then Zoe's outside the abbey, and Dracula's talking about, he doesn't eat cattle, blood is testimony, he eats the perfect food. Then Zoe realises that to catch Dracula she has to be like him, so she opens his blood vial and drinks it. Then all the knowledge in the past from Dracula is in her. So the Jonathan Harker Foundation as possibly occult funding. And Dracula stole Jack's phone and he's starting texting Lucy Westenra. And then we see a sequence and Dracula looks like Bond. It's quite James Bond style. And he enters the club and we see Lucy dancing. And then we see this flashback and it's Agatha being bit in the asylum, in the convent, but Zoe's there and she can see it, and Agatha can see Zoe. Then we have the caption 3 months later, and it's a big party with Lucy and her friends again. Then Dracula's living with Renfield, and he's exercising on his exercise bike, and Renfield's been giving Dracula victims through Tinder. I thought that was quite funny. And we see Frank Renfield's started looking a lot scruffier. And he's occasionally eating flies. Dracula texts Lucy, and turns out Lucy is getting married to Quincy Morris, but she's got a taste for hanging out with Dracula and getting bitten. So Van Helsing has left the foundation, Jonathan Harker Foundation, at this point. So, and then there's a funny bit where Frank Renfield puts his hand on Dracula's shoulder, and Dracula's like, and then Lucy's obsessed with people thinking she's pretty, and Dracula's swiping Tinder. And then she turns up to the meeting, it turns out Dracula's already drank someone from Tinder. Then Dracula, gentlemanly, puts his cape on the floor and lies on the floor with Lucy, and so he can suck her blood. But then the zombie children come out, and they talk about the Bloofer Lady, which is the beautiful lady. I thought that's how they brought that from the book into the show. I thought that was good. And then her friend's worried about where Lucy is, and he looks around Friend Finder. And then Dracula's with Lucy, and whilst he drinks, she gets to dream about anything she wants. Renfield is in a car doing crosswords, and he eats a fly, and he's doing a crossword, he's doing cryptic crossword, and he just writes Dracula is my lord as the answer. So he's coming under his spell. Then Seb, who is Lucy's gay friend, he finds her, and Lucy's in bed and she looks really ill, and Jack is looking at Lucy's throat where there's a bite mark on it. Then Zoe Van Helsing is in a hospital bed, and she sees a nun by the window who disappears. Then Jack Seward comes to visit her, and they're discussing why has he chosen Lucy specifically. She's just an ordinary person. And then we go back to Lucy's house, and Lucy's covers are being pulled off her bed, and it's a zombie child playing peekaboo. And then Dracula comes in with it and stakes the zombie child. And then Lucy's becoming a vampire undead. And then we see daytime, and Lucy is still, and there's flies around her, and she's in a mirror screaming for help. And then we see that they think she's died. So Lucy's been buried alive, but her mind, because she's becoming vampire, is still awake. And there's Quincy, but he's already got his bag ready to go back to Texas. And then her coffin is being burnt, and she's inside it, like sort of like awake, and she can see it all. And then Dracula comes to rescue her. Agatha visits Zoe, but they're in the past in the asylum, and it explains that Zoe got Dracula's blood, and this experience is in memory of Agatha and Agatha's spirit. And then we still don't know who the foundation is funded by. Then Agatha is a spirit and Zoe is the flesh. Then there's our beautiful camera shot of Dracula. It's like a modern style cathedral look to it, and it's like his home, but it's like his castle, and it's like modern, and it's amazing. Then Zoe calls Jack Seward for help. Then they see Zoe sees that her reflection is Agatha. Then Lucy is looking in the mirror, and all she sees has a normal human appearance, all pretty. and then Dracula storms. Dracula is there and Jack is there, and he storms towards Jack and talks about conversation precedes dinner, and then talk about this big reveal about what Lucy really looks like and how she perceives her beauty and what happens when she realizes, because they make her take a selfie so she can see her true countenance. And Dracula's there saying she's beautiful, she'd be his best bride. And to be honest, if he were offering, and then she's his best bride because she was almost in love with death, and she was intrigued by it, and that's why she was his best bride. And Lucy's devastated, and she asks Jack to stake her, and he kisses Lucy goodbye, and then she's staked, and Dracula is stamping on her ashes, and is like Lucy was sort of his experiment. And Agatha appears in Surrey, and then there's it's all Drax gone, and they're having she's having a private conversation with Dracula. And then on his way out, Jack says it's going to be a beautiful day. Then Surrey runs to the big curtains over the window and reveals the sunlight, and Dracula's all being all drama queen, and then he's like, wait what, and so he says, it can't, it's like thousands and thousands and millions of miles away. And then turns out the vampire legends that became legends was habits. And what does Dracula really fear? And so Van Helsing with Agatha says that Dracula fears death, that he lacks the courage to die. And so Van Helsing is submitting to dying, that she has more courage than Dracula. Dracula finally can walk into the sunlight and actually experience the beauty of the sun, and the shadow of the cross goes over him, and then there's a white screen and blurred images, and Dracula's with Zoe/Agatha, and he's drinking Zoe's blood, but because she's got bitter blood, it'll kill him too. And then they sort of die together, and the sun is there. I thought it was beautiful. I really enjoyed this show, and I really liked it. I'm a bit disappointed that a lot of people on Twitter were complaining and saying they didn't like it, and especially one tweet that said, oh, this is what the whole of the UK is thinking about Dracula. And I thought, why do some people, neurotypical people, do that, where they have to have the whole of the UK thinking the same way that they do? I really liked it. If other people, well, I wouldn't say that, oh, the whole of the UK really like this. No, I liked it. I don't need to bring in everybody else in the country to confirm my opinion. So that was annoying, but I really enjoyed the show. I thought it was beautiful. The cinematography was amazing. It was absolutely gorgeous. And then over on BBC Two, we got this brilliant Mark Gatiss documentary, which I totally recommend. First, I made one or two notes about this, not too many because we're mostly watching. Castle Arava is gorgeous. I'm glad they picked that one. Oh, it's amazing. And then I thought it was funny, there's a toothpaste ad on the bus advertising whiten your teeth. I thought that was quite funny. And then we talked about how Dracula started, how the story was created by Bram Stoker having this dream about all these 3 women vampires, or like one trying to eat him, and then it says a man vampire says, "This man belongs to me, I want him," and that's basically your gay panic dream. So he's like dreaming of these women. It's like, women, oh, this man belongs to me, I want him, and talks about how he was obsessed with and in love with Henry Irving, and it went to the library and about all the different books that Bram Stoker got out of the library and reference. And then I learned how to say something. I learned how to say Fandisiakle, because yes, I will have pictures of my notes just after this talking bit. But I don't know how to say. I've always said Findisiakle, but it's apparently, according to Mark Gatiss, it's Fandisiakle. Then we saw this amazing house, and this guy who's interviewing David Scarl, I think it was his house, but his amazing house, and then talked about how the stage vampire, when they did a production of Dracula on stage, he was going to go down through the trapdoor in the stage, and it's called the vampire trap, and that's why the Dracula cape has such a high collar, because they had to hide his head when he went, because he was going to fall through the cape and the other actors be left holding the cape, so they'd need to disguise his head, and that's why the collar's so big. So I thought it was really interesting. And then it talks about how they made one of the Dracula films, they made it in other languages with other actors of that language, and the Spanish Dracula says "Soy Dracula," so this was a vegetarian Dracula. And then I loved that when Mark was talking about the Abbott and Costello film, and they said it was like a Gothic Avengers Assemble. I loved that. And then we saw Bray Studios and how that was the home of Hammer Harriet, and now they're making the new Dracula series. And I love that he called Christopher Lee an upright shark. And we saw Oakley Court Hotel, which looks really beautiful, and Tykes Water Bridge, which looks beautiful. And there were some reeds that Mark was stood in front of, and they looked like a painting. And then turns out the Dracula film that is actually uses a lot of Whitby is the 1977 film Count Dracula, and that uses a lot of Whitby. And then he goes to I'm pretty sure it's the Rosa Hotel, which has the room where Bram Stoker stayed, and it's all dressed up. It's all themed. It's really cool there. And then talked about the Bram Stoker Festival in Dublin. It's a really good documentary. I really recommend that. So I really recommend watching this Dracula show and then the documentary. But what I would recommend is reading the story first, but then watching the show, because then you see what they've changed and what they've put a twist on and stuff. I recommend the book I recommend is The New Annotated Dracula. That is a very good book. So that is my big review of Dracula. I really enjoyed it. It's a great start to January. I'm so happy that January's so packed full of really cool stuff. So I hope you have enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching. Yay!